Welcome to Conversations with Friends, a podcast of Built Up Ministries. Join our friends and ministry partners as we discuss various topics of life to offer encouragement and equipping in living the life of faith. Hello, and thank you for joining our podcast, Conversation with Friends. My name is Jen Duggar, and I am joined by NaTaya Gary.
Hi.
And Kaylee Walls.
Hey.
So today we're super excited because we are starting our 6-part series that we call Dangerous Emotions. And this really is talking about some of those strong and dangerous emotions that we can face in life that rob us from what God intends for us to have. So the goal in talking about them is really just for us to share our experiences with the hope that it will help you, the listener, find some encouragement. And we just want to be upfront right from the beginning that none of us are licensed professionals. So if you are really struggling with some of the things that we'll be discussing, we want to encourage you to really just reach out for professional help. Many of us have gone through that ourselves or currently doing that. We think Jesus and therapy is a very good thing. And so we just want to make sure that you guys know that. Well, it is time to start our discussion, but before we do, actually, I do want to know, how has your week gone, Kaylee and NaTaya? Because I feel like it's been forever since we talked last.
It has. Yeah, for me, I've had a really fun week, mainly because it's been filled with lots of visitors. My brother, his wife, and their sweet daughter came into town, so we got to spend time with them. And they just left today, and we had another visitor arrive. So I'm having a lot of fun with that. And I'm just grateful to have a space where, we can have people over, have people stay with us, and we're not like super cramped. So it's been really fun.
That's awesome. So NaTaya, what I hear is that she's got room for you when her current visitor leaves, right?
All right. So you're not going to take me in?
You can come in, NaTaya.
Love that. Tell us about your week, NaTaya.
My week has been really exciting. It started off with Miles being on the news. He was recognized for a good deed that he did at school.
Okay.
So that was really exciting. And then later this week, I am going to a Golden State Warriors game with my oldest son. So I'm excited. Okay. It's just for me, I feel like the good is outweighing the bad, because there has been a couple stressful things that have been going on, but the good this week is outweighing the bad, which is really nice to say. So
awesome.
That's awesome. I'm not gonna lie, I got a little bit of envy there going to an NBA game. That's super cool. All right, guys. Well, we are talking about dangerous emotions. And I'm not gonna lie, every time I think about this series, I have like this crazy eternal music going on, like, that scary jump scene that you get in movies. And I know, low-key, it's super weird, but it's just the vibe that I get. And I think it's because, we're talking about emotions that are really crippling and damaging to people's lives. For instance, today, fear and anxiety. So first, I want to talk actually about fear. Fear for me has been a huge impact, or had a huge impact in my life, especially as a young child. I remember being so afraid that I couldn't fall asleep. Like I would legit have those night sweats, when you're like so freaked out. And it's actually why I don't watch scary movies. I'm no idea why I'm like dreaming or having this music in my head. It totally doesn't make sense. But in all seriousness, fear was so paralyzing to me. Even when I became a parent, I could see it just rear its head, because I would just like hit like this panic and just really freak out anytime I was afraid that my kids would get hurt or be threatened. And so, anytime I didn't feel like I was in control, like fear would just really wreak havoc in my life. So I'm wondering, have either you two experienced this, or maybe of somebody close to you who has experienced fear in such a debilitating way?
Yeah, I can relate to this from personal experience. Um, I was in a terrible car accident that left me and my boys hanging upside down. And so I had to kick out the windows and rip the seatbelts out in order to get us out.
Wow.
And I was pregnant with my youngest. And so that left a lot of fear and anxiety because just driving felt debilitating. Like it felt like, my hands would sweat, my heart would race, and I felt like I couldn't make wise decisions because I was paralyzed by this fear. And so I don't know. It's just one of those things that for me, I never had a ton of experience with fear and anxiety up until this point. And so I, in conjunction to this car accident, was also in an abusive relationship. So there was just a lot combined right there. And so for me, I did not seek therapy or anything or any help from anybody because I thought, well, maybe it'll subside, maybe go away. I didn't know how it worked, but thankfully God delivered us from all of that, the things that came after the car accident and just being in an abusive relationship. But I don't know. I was a new believer when I started experiencing these things. So, just trying to balance God and community, like trying to find that help. It was difficult, definitely. So,
well, thanks for sharing. I can only imagine what that was like for you. How about you, Kaylea?
Oh, yes. I have definitely experienced fear. And for me, fear and anxiety really go hand in hand. To me, it's like fear is the initial feeling or response to a situation. And then anxiety starts to kick in when we keep dwelling on that fear for too long and we're choosing to not speak truth into it. So for me, my experience with this for the first time, because honestly, up until this point, I really hadn't experienced intense fear and anxiety. It was more so just like, I'm worried today about something. And so I would just bring it to the Lord, pray through it, and I was okay. But for me, the intense experience was when I was first stepping into the call God has given me into worship ministry. I was taking over the high school youth band, and I had just graduated out of high school. I was just feeling really inadequate and incapable. And I just thought that there had to be someone else who would have done a better job. I was like, not me. But, God had chosen me and he had equipped me with everything I needed. But the problem was I did not believe that to be true. I really worried about what other people thought. I really focused on my own weaknesses, and I let it create within me this intense fear that really hindered what God wanted to do through me, because fear honestly paralyzes us. I still showed up every week, but on the inside, I was freaking out. And it got so bad that I would experience physical panic attacks before I would show up to rehearsal, because I just felt so overwhelmed and so unsupported. And I had never experienced that before. It was a really tough time for me because I just remember driving to work and just crying because I did not understand where this dark cloud came from, why it was over me, why I couldn't get rid of it like I did before, where I would just, pray about it. It was like settling over me. And that was it was so intense. So I've personally experienced fear on a scale. I've experienced that worried fear that I explained, where it's like all of a sudden something's bothering me and I just take a minute to think about it and then pray about it, address it, and I'm okay. And then I've experienced that fear that is just so intense that it's almost kept me from what God's calling me to do. And then the fear that overwhelms and paralyzes me from life. So I have definitely had experiences with that. And obviously it's not fun to talk about these things, but I'm grateful to have the opportunity, because I just want people to know that they're not alone and that God can bring you out of this.
Yeah. And one of the reasons why I'm glad that we're talking about this is because I think it's important for us to say that not all fear is bad. Fear is a natural response that can help us detect danger. It protects us. Often you hear that it triggers that flight, fight, or freeze response. And so, like, a great example of that would be like, go to step off a curb and a taxi cab is coming streaming by. Fear can make you freeze, and that's a really good thing. That being said, fear can also be paralyzing and can really just rob you from quality of life when it gets to an unhealthy level. And that's what I struggled with. I struggled with it because I suffered a lot of harm as a child that I had no control over. And so I just became super afraid. And it just became such a part of my life that I didn't even realize the grip it had on me until I became a parent and I could start seeing triggers that would really show what was going on. So again, fear in itself is not necessarily bad, but what we do with it can be bad, specifically when it causes us not to trust God. So, like for me, nighttime, walking alone in the dark, that was something that was really hard for me. And so when I became aware of it, I had to learn to overcome that fear with faith, because faith in those situations are it's the opposite of fear for that. And so for me personally, I had to learn a lot of scripture. And one of my favorite scriptures at that time was Psalms 56:3. Used to sing it. I will spare us from that. But it just talked about that whenever I'm afraid, I will trust in thee. So I'm not going to lie, even times when I was really gripped with fear, I would even sleep with the Bible underneath my pillow just because it gave me peace. Might be weird to some, but again, that's what I had to do. So I know, Kaylee, you talked a little bit about this, but like, why don't you guys share a little bit about what are the things that you've done that you have found that have helped you deal with fear?
Yeah, so for me, I already said this a little bit, but when I was experiencing this new intensity of fear and anxiety, just kind of praying for the anxiousness to go away wasn't working. And what I'll explain is it had to be much more intentional than that. So what I had to do was a lot of heart work. I had to figure out what is causing this fear. Why am I so terrified to step onto the stage? There's always a root cause, and we have to do the hard work of prayer and asking God to reveal it to us. I remember learning that I cared about what people thought of me way more than I realized, because I'm not a people pleaser. So I was surprised by this. But I needed to know where the problem was coming from so that I could then find scripture to combat it and to free me from those lies. So it took a lot more work than just like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling anxious. Let me just pray right now. It was like, okay, what am I praying about? I'm praying to find the root cause, and then I'm going to go find truth so that I can speak it over that lie and hold that thought captive. And the book that helped me the most, the book was basically my counselor. It was amazing. It's called Emotions by Charles Stanley. The book walks you through all these different emotions you can experience and what your root cause might be. It helps you really realize where you're struggling. And then it gives you scripture to combat that specific lie. And when you're in the thick of anxiety and you're just not really in the mood to like research, it was so helpful to have that, just those verses laid out. Like, if you're struggling with this, then speak this verse. And I think the thing that made the biggest difference is that it didn't say just to kind of recite the verse in your head. It said specifically to speak it out loud, and to speak it out loud until you believe it. So for me, that's what made the biggest difference. So I find that verse and then I speak it out loud until I believe it. The verse that I specifically memorized and that I was speaking over and over during this time is Psalm 16, 8-9. And it says, I know the Lord is always with me. I will not be shaken, for he is right beside me. No wonder my heart is glad and I rejoice. My body rests in safety. And so it truly happened that my mind was being transformed. I would speak it out loud, and then God would help me change my mindset. It was really taking those thoughts captive and making them obedient to Christ with that scripture.
So good. Thanks for sharing. What about you, NaTaya?
For me, it's getting help. Because I am not the type of person, Jen, to ask for help. I'll struggle before I ask anybody for help. But but as I became a Christian, I actually realized the importance of community. And so being around the right people that were willing to help point me in the right direction has been very helpful. And, once I started talking to a therapist, things slowly but surely started to change. But ultimately, I had to trust guidance. As I was listening to you, Kaylea, you said, I needed to find the root cause. And my root cause is I didn't trust God. I could read scripture all day long, but if I don't believe it, it's going to be hard for me to trust the promises that God has laid out before us in His Word. So, I had to trust that God has a plan for me. 1 Peter 5:7 says, casting all your anxieties on Him because He cares for you. He cares for me. And I had to believe that. And so I had to believe that God's plans for me are good and that I should have nothing to fear. So over time, as I started to trust Him and see the way that God was transforming, things really started to change, because I think you have to just take that leap of faith. You have to go, okay, I always tell myself what I have to lose before I do something that consists of trusting. So for me, I had to take that leap of faith and be like, okay, I am going to have to trust God to take care of me. And then when you see that He does, then your trust starts to build over time. And so, when my 4 boys and I moved into our house, it was the first time in a long time that we lived on our own. Prior to that, we were staying with my mom. Prior to that, with the kids' dad. So, it was weird living on our own after having been through so many traumatic events. But as I got settled in my house, I realized I can't sleep. I was so excited to have my own house, my own garden. I have a laundry room that's in the house. I don't have to go to the laundromat. There's so much joy, and getting this house was so miraculous. And so it just bothered me that I couldn't experience joy fully, because at night I found myself a wreck. I couldn't sleep. I would lay awake at night and with wasp spray and a huge stick, and just waiting for somebody to come after us, waiting for somebody to knock the door down or to come through the doggy door, or somebody to that was ready somewhere around the corner to kill us. I just had big fears. And so this went on for a very long time. And, when I was thinking about how long it was, I was going to say a couple of weeks. I'm like, no, girlfriend, it had to have been more than a year that I was dealing with this. And so I remember one night I couldn't sleep, and God confronted me in that. He said, trust me and see what happens. So I decided to go to sleep that night and trust God was going to not only take care of my boys through the night, but that He would take care of me. I think one of the issues I had was, for if I go to sleep, who's going to watch my kids? Who's going to protect them? And God is like, I've got this. I'm going to take care of your kids. And so from that point on, He's done just that. Every morning I wake up, I'm alive, my kids are alive, and all is well. And so when I began to see that I could trust God with that, slowly but surely, I began to give other things over to God, because I'm like, okay, I could trust Him with this. Okay, I'm gonna trust Him with this, and you just slow steps. So what I've gathered from all of that is that God is trustworthy and He is true, and I, without a doubt, can confidently say that. for anyone struggling with fear, you can trust God today and you will see it for yourself. You'll be so glad you did. I know I am.
Thank you for sharing that too. And, something that comes to my mind that I really want to just, reach out and encourage somebody. None of us are sitting there saying that trusting God doesn't mean bad things don't happen, because at the end of the day, she got in an accident. I had, been a victim to childhood stuff. But in the end, it didn't steal the life that God had for us, because even looking back, and at least for me, I can speak of that difficult thing, that God was there and that he helped me through it. And I'm here today because of it. And what God has done in my life is break the unhealthy fear that caused me to be so afraid of anything else that would come, or to me or to my children, to just not carry that weight of that fear, because God is trustworthy no matter what. And like I said, he's helped me get through a lot of difficult times. And so this is why, we can do a lot of things, but we still need to surrender to God. We need to trust him, because there's only so much we can do. And, again, there's a natural fear that happens, but we're talking about an unhealthy fear that causes you to be so afraid that you cannot trust God. And the only way really to move forward is to start, kind of like what NaTaya, you were talking about, is you just have to just cross that line and put your faith in God and just do it. And I love that, he gave practical means, like we all, I think, got Bible verses. Kaylea, you got a book. I slept with the Bible underneath my pillow, but, at the end of the day, we know that it was God. So now let's talk about anxiety, because we know that anxiety is something that hit an all-time high with COVID. It's weird for me because, like, during COVID, I actually didn't have that anxiety that a lot of people had. But the interesting for me is that I did go through a bout of really, like, uncontrolled, unforeseen anxiety, probably a year after COVID, and it wasn't necessarily connected to COVID. So while it wasn't COVID related, I kind of get it. And it was just so weird for me because, like, it came out of nowhere. My heart, like, actually would race, and I'd feel like this tightening. And then that, of course, would make me freak out even more, which was not beneficial. And I was really just like stumped of like, okay, God, there's not a crisis I can trace back to why I'm feeling this. Have you guys ever gone through a bout of anxiety? And again, maybe if you haven't, have you known somebody where you don't know why? It's not because like there's a stress or a crisis, like it just comes out of nowhere and you're like, why am I feeling so anxious? Or is it just me?
Well, Jen, I could definitely relate to you because I remember when just not too long ago, I had to go see a cardiologist because I was having chest pain and pain down my left arm, up my neck, and, on my back. The cardiologist was like, you are the wrong type of person to be in my office. Like, what are you doing here? And, they couldn't really find anything. And even my doctors are just going, like, this past year, I've been going to the doctor all the time and they couldn't find anything. And so I was like, I'm just going to have to take this. I'm just going to have to figure out what's going on. I'm just going to have to come up with a game plan that's going to work for me. But my anxiety, it comes from a lot of different places. Having been in an abusive relationship where my kid's father was heavily into drugs and alcohol, and he also had really serious mental health issues. And then from being in that car accident, that just even to this day, when I tell people about it, it blows my mind. I just remember being in the ER, and the sheriff, when he came to the hospital, he's like, there's no way you and your kids should have survived that.
That's crazy.
And then working at a prison, when you work at a prison, it becomes your norm. So it feels like this is normal for me. But, every one of us that had worked at that state prison had picked something up that has caused some type of psychiatric issues. And so, just from all of that, and then being a single mom of 4 boys, it's just, there's always there's anxiety. There's that temptation to lean into the anxiety. Like it's almost like anxiety's like, if you don't worry about it, who's going to take care of it? And you want to think ahead, you want to plan, but it's all a trap. And it could be very tempting, especially if you have a lot of things that you worry about. But I thought that anxiety was who I was. Like I was starting to believe that that's who I am. And I'm learning today that it's not. I'm not defined by anxiety nor fear. And I'm defined by the one who created me. And anything outside of who I am defined by God is null and void, and so I can overcome these things because of the one who saved me. He's saved me from death, and I'm pretty sure he can save me from just about anything he chooses to. Anxiety is a temptation that wants you to give in. However, anxiety can be defeated. I've seen it happen in my life, so I know that it can happen for others.
That's so good. What about you, Kaylea?
Yeah, so for me, besides the more intense, like constant, continual anxiety that I described earlier, I have experienced less intense ones. And those are the ones for me that do seem to just come out of nowhere. It's like, oh my gosh, why am I feeling this all of a sudden? And so I think, reflecting on this, I have pinpointed it to be two different things. All of a sudden, let's say I get that anxiety, and it's like, okay, what triggered that? What did someone say, or what did someone do that almost triggered something inside of me to have this response? And it's like, it's just an alert to me that I have some more heart work to do and something to pray through. And then the other thing for me is, honestly, I can feel that way when I'm just not eating enough, or if I don't eat in the morning and then I go through my day at work. And funny enough, I ended up doing that today, not on purpose. I grabbed my frozen breakfast and then I tried to use the toaster oven at work for the first time and it totally burned. So I didn't have breakfast.
Oh, no.
And so I started feeling the heart beating a little bit faster, and it wasn't a stressful day. But if it was a stressful day, I'm sure that wouldn't have helped it anymore. So for me, I've noticed that food has a lot to do with it. If I go too long without eating, I can start to have that adrenaline response, and then I feel anxious, even if maybe I'm not worried about anything.
And I love that we all bring so much different varieties to anxiety to the table. Things that, maybe are because of your thoughts, things that are maybe because of your diets, things that come out of nowhere because, there's just this stigma in the Christian circle that just says, if you're feeling fear and anxiety, especially anxiety, then you are not a good Christian, you're just not having enough faith. And it's just, I hate that because that is just not true. It is so not true that, again, anxiety comes. And I love, NaTaya, that you talked about it being a temptation, because for me, when the season of anxiety I was talking about, it was directly related to spiritual warfare. And so when God brought it to my life and I had suffered for a good 4 weeks, and then finally God led me to a way to help me. And for that, it was through essential oils and stuff. Then I became aware of it. But, like Kaylea, if it's food related, then but sometimes it is our thought life. And so I just want to put it out there to be very careful about what you think and say to somebody who's going through fear and anxiety, and to not cast stones, because again, sometimes it's not about not having enough faith. And having that said is not always, it's not beneficial. It just causes so much judgment and everything. That being said, there is truth to external things that can cause. And I know that I have created some anxiety in my life by thinking about, things unhealthily. So then that's where I have to kind of do that heart work, like you were talking about, Kaylea, and stuff like that. And this is why, again, we say Jesus plus therapy, right? And honestly, I can't take credit for that. I think Jackie Hill Perry actually cloned that, and she even has merch on it. And that is because that it is about going to Jesus and faith, but it's also recognizing that that God does use external things like correcting your diet. For me, it was essential oils. For some people, it's talking to someone. For other people, it would be like medicine. So, how have you seen God in your specific circumstances use faith and external resources to help you through your anxiety, find that healing that you are seeking? And why do you think it's important for us to recognize that that God can use other things besides just pray and just have faith? Because that, again, is very important, but he also uses other things. NaTaya, you want to go first?
Yeah, I want to start off with 2 verses. I'm going to start off with Psalm 32:8. It says, I will instruct you and teach you in the way you should go. I will counsel you with my eye upon you. And then Isaiah 30:21 says, and your ears shall hear a word behind you saying, this is the way, walk in it, when you turn to the right or when you turn to the left. And I like this because this is exactly how God has directed my journey. And it's going to look different for everybody. So for me, I began the healing process with just some essential oils. I was like, I don't have to talk to nobody. I started small. I was like, all I have to do is run, so I used Valor. I used, I believe, Sarah. And I think those were the 2 that I used. More sedative. So like Melissa, I think it was another one. Anything that kind of relax you. So I started using essential oils when I actually started having flashbacks. So I would be just in my normal day and I would have a flashback that would seem very real. Like I could be driving down the street and like I would have a flashback of a car just running into me or something. It'd just be very scary, especially when you're traveling with kids and stuff. But over time, they began to work. I was inhaling. I was like inhaling. I rubbed it on my hands. I'd rub them together and I'll, breathe in. And when I started doing this, when I started my first job here, I was working at Martin Brower, and people would see what I was doing and they would ask the supervisor, like, what is she doing? He'd be like, just give her a break. She's just taking a moment to herself. He knew what I was doing, but they knew not to mess with me in that moment. Just give her a little bit of space. She's just, inhaling her essential oils. And it's so funny because then they started asking me, hey, could you make me that tea with the thieves? So it worked. They knew it too. But I really needed to look into the very thing that I was trying to avoid. And that was people, therapy, community. So my current job where I work at a local church here in Southern Illinois, my job said that they would pay for my therapy after I talked to my supervisor about what was going on. And so I decided to try it. It's free. I'll try it. If I don't like it, I could just stop. But it's been about 2+ years since I've been in therapy, and I really like my therapist. She actually has the same voice as my favorite YouTuber, so that really helps. But once I began to see the benefits of therapy, I began to look into just slowly, changing some things up, like diet. I feel like I've taken more control over it this year. I started with exercise last year, and exercise is what really got me sleeping through the whole entire night. So like if anybody struggles with sleeping, period, or sleeping through the night, if you do like a 20-40 minute cardio session, it could possibly help with you sleeping through the whole entire night. I always do mine at night. I know a lot of people like to do the morning, but for me, night works because then it puts me to sleep. You'll have that period where you're kind of high off that cardio session. I don't know how else to say it, but then, give it about 30 minutes to an hour and you should be going to sleep. So that was one of the things that I did. And I noticed I was also joyful, optimistic. My mood started to change. I wasn't moody. So, there are some benefits with, exercise. And so anxiety and panic issues they began to subside and become less frequent. This year, I got more so into diet, watching sugar and carbs specifically, and just eating more of a just whole foods type of diet. So this year I lost 35 pounds in 2023, and I began to take control of what I ate. The things that I used to eat had control over me, but it feels great to have control of what I eat and how I feel. So God led me to through all these situations, which I'm thankful for, through my therapist, my doctor, and the people in my community. And so I serve a God that knows me inside and out, and he knows what is best for me. When I seek him out, he leads, or when we seek him out, he leads us where we should go. One of my favorite verses is Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So we need to trust and follow him, and he will lead you in the way you should go concerning your life and the issues that you may be facing.
So good. So good. And so I love that you say that, because again, we're not saying it's not faith, because honestly, you can't just do behavior modification either and then have no faith. You need both, and it really starts with faith, like that verse that you share, Proverbs 3 verses 5 and 6, so that, God will direct you like he did with me. I love that he directed you to essential oils too. That's so cool. Kaylea, how about you?
Yeah, so to kind of sum up what I had described before, that period of intense anxiety lasted for about 3 months. So just very intense, very continual, 3 months. And I had spent that time going to that book every night, getting on my knees and just saying, God, I need you to pull me out of this. And so I worked through that with him. But the interesting thing that happened is, even though I was getting through the reason that was causing the anxiety and I didn't feel really anxious about anything, I was still having panic attacks. And this went on for a while. And so I decided to go see someone who could help me. And that was my chiropractor. I think I sometimes wait too long to do that. But I went to him, and he basically explained to me that my body was stuck in this adrenaline flight or fight response. And that's why I kept experiencing anxiety attacks, even though I had dealt with the reasons that first caused it. So he put me on this diet where I needed to eat every 3 to 4 hours so that my body had something to utilize and so that it wouldn't trigger the adrenaline response again. And those first 3 days that I did that, I felt pretty miserable. But then after that, it was like, oh my gosh, the weight was lifted, because it was just such a horrible feeling to have that panic attack, even though I really wasn't anxious. So specifically, what he also had me do diet-wise was to make sure that I was having enough protein. I didn't cut out carbs, and then just to have good fats. So it was just making sure it was healthy and that I was eating enough, really. So after doing this, that's when the panic attack stopped for me. And I was overjoyed, as you could imagine. I've been dealing with that for a long time, and it was nice to feel like myself again. But I did have to eat like that for a while before I was able to just kind of go back to normal and not notice any anxiousness. And I did say I'm still careful about not going too long without eating, because it's just not what's good for my body. But it got so much better after that. It was like a whole different level. So I do find that my body is still prone to stress. So I try to eat consistently and often to give my body the fuel I need to handle that stress without triggering the adrenaline response. So for me, diet was the huge tool that helped me, besides digging through the root causes. I needed them both. It was like one and then time for the other. That was just my story. And at that time, I didn't exercise, mainly because my body was so weak. So I had nothing left. And so for me, that would not have been the best best thing because I literally had no energy. So it was just like fuel, and food is fuel. So that's kind of where I was at in that season. So to me, we're humans who have a body, mind, and a soul. And so if we need healing, we likely need that healing in all of those areas. So don't try to leave one out. They all work together.
So good. So good. And again, this is just to encourage other people, especially because sometimes in the church, we, get it wrong. If I'm honest, we'll sit there and we'll say, if you just have more faith, then, you wouldn't be where you are. And the truth is that, I hopefully you're hearing that we all have faith and we all went to God with our unique situations because he's our creator and he knows exactly how to heal us. And so for me, it was solely through essential oils, and it's been something that I've been able to thus far be able to maintain, although I might have to listen to some cardio for 20 minutes before I go to bed tonight because I am starting to struggle with falling asleep. But, Kaylee, obviously diet was so impactful for you. And NaTaya, I think you were just a combination of a lot of things. And so we just really want to stress that seek God first and ask him, be honest with him, let him know what's going on, and then follow where he leads you for help, whether that's through therapy, diet change. I mean, God often uses other things to heal us because he does want us to interact with people, and he is not limited into how he will heal us. And so I just want to encourage somebody with that. Any last encouragement for you two, to somebody who's listening who maybe is struggling with fear and anxiety?
Oh yeah. I mean, from me to you, if you are in that season of just intense anxiety and you're feeling like there's no way out, I want to give you hope. And I want you to know that I have been freed from this. I have been healed from this. And it's because God and the work that he did in my life, and he can do that for you. And he wants to do that for you. So bring this to him, seek him, have faith in him, dig deep, get help, and he will heal you from this. What I wish someone would have done for me when I was going through that was to tell me that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This isn't going to last forever. And so that's what I want to speak into you. Go to him. It's, in our weakness that his strength is made perfect. So get on your knees and he will heal you from this. He will help you with this. So don't give up. You are too important for that.
So good. So good. NaTaya?
Yeah. If you are struggling with these emotions, know there is help out there. First, lean into Jesus. Allow his word, prayer, the fellowship of other believers, worship, etc., to be a source of hope, help, and strength. Second, don't stop there. God often uses others, professionals, counselors, therapists, or science, whether that's holistic or medicine, to help us. So do something, do not suffer.
Amen to that. Do not suffer, get help. Love that. Well, ladies, thank you so much. First of all, for your honesty. I know it's encouraging when we know that we're not alone, because I think sometimes so many people suffer, especially in church, because I think, oh my gosh, I'm the only person who's going through that. I thank you for sharing your perspective, as I know it will also help somebody get some ideas of where to go. Well, we do hope that you enjoyed this episode and that you will join us for our part 2 of our Dangerous Emotions series, where we are going to discuss discouragement. But until then, we both, NaTaya and Kaylea, and I, or all of us, I guess I should say, not both. Bad math, sorry. But seriously, guys, we wish you grace and peace this week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.